You're listening to Health Coach Conversations, a podcast where our conversations help health coaches all around the world to level up our businesses and to get more clients. Hello and welcome. I'm founder of the Health Coach Group and host of Health Coach Conversations. I am interviewing Deborah Charnes today. For 2 decades, Deborah managed hundreds of news conferences, editorial board meetings, press briefings, and one-on-one interviews. She worked with security, communications, and advanced teams for John McCain, Hillary Clinton, President Barack Obama, First Lady Michelle Obama, then Vice President Joe Biden, Dr. Jill Biden, Bernie Sanders, Jennifer Lopez, and the Vice President of El Salvador. To balance the chaotic scales directing major league campaigns, it was essential for her to soothe the stress and 24/7 schedule with body, mind, and soul lifesavers. In 2011, Deborah left the high-pressure demands as an international corporate marketing communication strategist. Moving forward, she dedicated that same energy to positive transformation of herself and others. She vowed to never stop learning or sharing. Already a certified yoga teacher, she added training in Ayurvedic massage therapy, nutrition, and cooking. She received certification in multiple holistic modalities, and after an additional 800 hours of specialized training, became one of the first bilingual English-Spanish certified yoga therapists in Texas. Coaching people with many challenges, she seeks to boost the body, mind, and spirit through simple techniques. To that end, she has created a dozen signature therapeutic workshops. A travel blogger since the early WordPress days, she's published 500 mind, body, and lifestyle articles. Her deep commitment to helping others achieve maximum well-being led her to write her award-winning book, From the Boxing Ring to the Ashram. So, it seems as if chronic pain and digestive disorders are the norm in our society today. How can your book answer some of those problems?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that I experienced chronic digestive disorder, and chronic back pain from the time I was an adolescent. And I am actually very thankful that I experienced those issues early on in my life, and my mother took me to top specialists. She took me to an orthopedic surgeon and a gastroenterologist. And fortunately, they both suggested lifestyle changes. So, for example, and I need to very clearly state, and this is explained in one of the chapters in my book, which features a New York City-based physiatrist, is that for back pain in particular, you have to understand what the cause of it is, of course. Is it neurological? Is it musculoskeletal? And in my instance, I had all of the imaging done, and it was postural and structural anatomical. And so from the time I was maybe 12 years old, I started sleeping with a wooden plank underneath my mattress. I also started working much more consciously about minimizing the natural curvature in my spine, which was too much. And then I started to work on strengthening my core. And that is something I will have to do for the rest of my life to help alleviate the pain. And I haven't had any back pain for ages. If I do, I know what I need to do structurally and through movement therapy to get myself back into feeling better. So I have an entire chapter in my book which features a physiatrist that gives a lot of tips, and he talks about many different things. But I do want to just kind of mention a couple of statistics. And of course, everyone can argue statistics,
Right.
But the statistics that I have read is 1 in 4 Americans experience chronic pain. The leading cause of going to a doctor, of course, is pain. And the primary cause of pain is in the back. And then in terms of digestive disorders, 60% of Americans have digestive disorders. Now, again, when I was very young, they did all the testing to rule out anything serious. And then when I was in my 50s, I requested a test for celiac just to rule that out. And, again, I do have a constant digestive disorder that I have to live with my entire life. But through diet in particular and through lifestyle, which my book is all about lifestyle, I can ease the problem because we all know the vast majority of our health problems are aggravated or caused by stress or by lifestyle. And let's face it, we all lead stressful lives. And when I look back on when I was 12, I think, what stress did I have back then? It seems invisible. And I am a holistic health coach practitioner. I ditched my 80-hour-a-week, extremely high-paced corporate job a long time ago. I think my lifestyle is so chill. And yet, I still have to watch it. The last time that I had severe stomach issues was the day of my father's funeral.
Yeah, I see that. So often people complain that they don't have time or energy for a healthy routine. Do you have any tips or tricks?
Absolutely. And I feel it. And what we say in the yogic world, there's some kind of a proverb, which I can't remember exactly how it is, but it's something about how the people that need to meditate the most are the ones that don't have time to meditate, or
Right.
something like that. And that's why what I do in my book is called From the Boxing Ring to the Ashram, Wisdom for Body, Mind, and Spirit. I featured 12 of my gurus around the world. Each one has like a different chapter, such as a physiatrist talking about back pain. But the top takeaway, and then I have give it a try in every chapter and also 5 easy tips in each chapter. And the idea is you can do all these things in 10 minutes a day or less. And I pulled an oracle card the other day from an oracle card deck. And I'm like, oh my God, this speaks to me. And again, I think I have such an easygoing life. And the card that I pulled was about rejuvenation. And it wasn't about turning back the years. It was about finding time every day, if just for a few minutes, to turn things off, to turn things down, just to sit and not do.
Some people find that really hard to settle down. Do you have any tips for that?
Of course, first of all, the very first chapter in my book is about meditation. And one of the things that kind of bothers me as a practitioner is people think, oh, I can't meditate. Well, I personally think I'm hyperactive and I'm the perfect example of somebody who can't meditate. But there are so many different ways that you can meditate. So I do walking meditation. I do chanting meditation. Weeding in the garden for me is meditation. Jigsaw puzzles for me are meditation. I do I mentioned chanting in terms of mantra repetition, but also singing can be devotional. Singing is meditation. There are so many different ways that we can meditate. Can I actually sit on a cushion and be quiet for an hour? Yes, I can. Do I do that every day? No. I do things that are more suited for my lifestyle and for me honoring my makeup.
Yeah. I like art and coloring books. I think those,
Oh,
yeah.
I did coloring books this weekend.
Did you? Good.
Your success is our blueprint. The Health Coach Group empowers health professionals with the tools and strategies needed to attract clients and build a robust online presence. Take the leap to a successful practice with our support. Visit thehealthcoachgroup.com now.
There's a lot of people with a lot extreme stress, like PTSD, and they have anxiety and depression. Why and what can be done?
I kind of see everything as a vicious circle, and our society, I don't want to say we create it, but we exacerbate. And of course, I do believe in generational trauma as well. And the second chapter in my book features a leading PhD researcher, neurologist from Harvard Medical School. And his chapter is all about he's researched yoga and the brain for about 20, 30 years. And so his chapter is all about what we can do using yoga for PTSD, anxiety, and depression. And one of the things that I thought was fascinating when I started researching this in terms of PTSD, and I never thought I had it. Now I recognize I do, because I have recurring dreams, which indicate it's always the same dream. And now I recognize, oh, I do or did have PTSD. But again, I never would have recognized it before. So PTSD comes across in so many different ways. And unfortunately, our society as a whole, we tend to, peg things as, for example, with veterans, we know that it's rampant among veterans. But even what I found was eye-opening, and it's like, of course, but why didn't I even think of that? Is people in the medical profession oftentimes will have PTSD, first responders, ER personnel. How can you not have well, I shouldn't say that. How can you not have PTSD is explained in my book, and it's based on the Harvard researcher. We all have different makeup. And
can you excuse me for just a second? Can you name the Harvard researcher?
Sure. It's Sat, S-A-T, Bir, B-I-R, Singh, S-I-N-G-H, Khalsa, K-H-A-L-S-A.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Sure. So it's Satbir Singh Khalsa. And what we all have different makeup, and perfect examples of this are at 9/11. During the 9/11 tragedy, two different people could be together, experiencing the exact same thing, and yet their response mechanisms were totally different. One thing that I thought was fascinating is there was one story about, I think it was a father and a son in 9/11, and I might have this wrong, but I believe the father was maybe a mental health professional or someone very tuned into how to address things like that. And when 9/11 happened, he was with his son, and they talked about it right away. And as a result, the son has, as healthy as possible, a response to it. And so that's where in our society, I think there are so many problems with our society that trigger PTSD, anxiety, and depression. Obviously, when we look at depression for, let's say, postpartum depression, we know that, of course, it's hormonal. But at the same time, we can do things to help women not get in those ruts. So, family members or friends or the partners or neighbors, if we all help the woman out in those postpartum days or months, I shouldn't say days, it's months, because the percentage of postpartum blues is astronomical as opposed to clinical depression, of course. So, of course, we have to, understand clinical depression versus postpartum blues. And for me, it's all about we have to take time out and nourish ourselves. I have been leading for many years I call them therapeutic yoga workshops. One is called First Love Yourself. But just like my book, I consider my book a yoga therapy in disguise book. Only one of the 12 chapters is about physical yoga, and that's about yoga in the back, because we're talking about fixing anatomical structure. The rest of the book is about lifestyle. And so I think, when I do my First Love Yourself workshops, it's all about lifestyle, and we have to do what we can to nurture ourselves. And again, to find some time to disconnect. One of the chapters in my book features a U.S. Air Force rabbi, and it's about how we all need to honor the Sabbath, however that means for us, regardless of our religion. I personally, 1 day a week, do not drive my car. I try to not drive my car several days a week, but 1 day a week, I don't drive my car, and I don't use any of my devices. And aren't we all pretty much addicted to our devices? I was at a chat yesterday with a monk, and he was talking about addictions and, of course, the high degree of substance abuse and addiction. But he said, we all have addictions. It's just what kind of addictions we have. And I would like to think that my addictions are healthy addictions, like yoga, not just the physical practice, but all of the different types of yoga, and reading. Those are my addictions, as opposed to addictions that can be much more aggravating to our levels of anxiety, and depression. Speaking of depression, aside from the chapter in my book, which features Dr. Satbir Singh Khalsa, two of my other chapters deal with people that I have been very close to, who experienced severe bouts with depression because of physical problems, and how they survived them, and how they are now those cheerleaders for what they do to help others. And ages ago, back around 1999, I did a project with the National Institute of Mental Health, and it was about stigma in the Latino community for depression and mental health. And we went to universities. We did a lot of research to better understand, and then can't resolve it, but help it. And one of the statistics that I learned back in the 1990s was that the majority of people with heart health problems also suffer from depression. And not to stereotype, but a large percentage of those people, of course, are male. And traditionally, especially back in the 1990s and within the Latino community, the men in particular, and my father was this way, he wouldn't admit he was a coach, a former coach. He wouldn't admit to any physical pain. He would, he needed 2 hip replacements, and he's like, I don't need anything. I'm fine. And aside from denying your physical needs, the denying of your mental health needs are so common. Of course, our society has gotten so much better about that since the 1990s, but we still have to advance in that area.
How can we, as in our positions working with people, how can we make people feel more comfortable with addressing that?
So that I love that question because I face that all the time because I am not a mental health professional.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter is a psychotherapist. And so I know my limitations and of course have, studying with others. But as a yoga therapist, and I can later explain the difference between a yoga teacher and a yoga therapist, but as a yoga therapist, all yoga therapists are different. Many yoga therapists come from mental health backgrounds, or they come from from public health or any other kind of health industries. So every yoga therapist may have a different area of expertise, but I find in my practice, I was taught to identify the root problem. And let's just say my digestive disorders, perfect example. My digestive disorders, yes, physically, I have problems in my gut and I will forever. But the root problem is how my body deals with stress.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, as a yoga therapist, I have to very gently, and especially since I'm not a mental health professional, I have to very gently try to figure out what I think my clients' root causes are, and then give them suggestions, lifestyle suggestions of what they can do, which they will enjoy. As an example, I have had some clients where I told them, go dancing. I've had others where I've said, go for long, slow walks as opposed to power walks, because some of us are like, okay, I'm going to do my power walk. I'm like, no, go for slow, relaxing walks or go and dance. And, well, for you, for example, and I'm not analyzing you, but just from what you said, I would suggest different forms of art therapy. And I had one child, 9 years old, with anxiety. And I look back at my childhood. Of course, we didn't diagnose most things back then, but I gave him a lot of art therapy to do because it was appropriate for the age and for what he was going through.
With over 40 years of business experience and serving over 1,500 clients, the Health Coach Group knows what it takes to succeed. Let our expertise and resources guide you to a thriving wellness practice. Visit thehealthcoachgroup.com today.
We used to be told to go outside and play. That was really a good thing to do, for kids.
Absolutely. I find so much fault with our current society. And, I'm not talking politics. I could talk that too, but I'm not talking politics, but I'm talking about how our society has advanced. And I think it's horrible how we've advanced and how children are addicted from such a young age to their devices as opposed to going out and playing. Mm-hmm. I was raised in Chicago where our summers could be very hot, our winters could be very cold. We didn't have air conditioning, and we went out no matter how hot or cold it was. We went out to play until dinner every day.
Right. Yeah. I grew up in Nebraska, and it was exactly the same way. You'd go out in the snow and in the ice, and you'd go out in the heat. It didn't matter. You went out every day, all day long.
The other thing I want to mention is I walked to my high school every day, which was about a mile. And again, didn't matter what the temperature was. I walked usually by myself. And that was where I first found meditation.
Really?
Because my walks, I loved them. And now I recognize it's because it was a form of meditation.
You're mindful while you're doing it. We talk about our lifestyles today and how it's really not maybe going in the right direction, but is stress taking over?
I think we have to look generationally in the workforce at what is going on for my generation. I'm a baby boomer. Absolutely. I mean, I was raised, my parents were Depression era. So, we were raised, you do whatever to save your butt, and I always had a paranoia of losing everything just because, my parents experienced all of that. So that is why I worked 80 hours a week. Did my boss force me to work 80 hours a week? No. But did we have mass layoffs every year? Yes. Did I survive all of those layoffs for 15 years? Yes. But that, of course, imagine all the stress and anxiety that I went through all the time. My daughter's generation, I'm so impressed with how many of the workforces are now, in which they give you unlimited personal PTO. I didn't know what a PTO was when I was working. PTO would have been post-traumatic overload.
Yeah.
And so I think things have changed with the younger generation. They are fighting more for the work-life balance, which my generation, and I'm not saying everyone from my generation, but definitely me, it was fight or flight, or freeze throughout my career.
Yeah, we were always brought up, and I felt like that was the best thing we could do with our kids, was bring them up to be hard workers. My son moved to England, and the first day at work, he went in and they couldn't believe he was there before 9 o'clock. They all made fun of him. And then, you take time out for lunch, you take time out for a break, and during COVID, they got to stay home with their kids and don't worry about work. Make sure your kids are okay. It's a whole different world in other places than what it is here in the United States, I think.
And of course, in Europe, it's traditional that you have a month off for the vacation. I lived in different countries as well. One country where I lived, which is featured in my book, but I'm not going to mention which country it is. But I worked at an advertising agency. And in the United States in particular, during my primary work era, especially in New York City, oh my God, people would be paid peanuts. Young people would be paid peanuts to work their butt off in the industry. And when I went to this agency to work in this other country, everybody was so nice. They were all so friendly. They would be playing darts while they were working. There was so much socialization, and I didn't see that much work. And I have to tell you, I kind of feel I'm kind of, hyperactive type A. I was bored. But of course, it was beautiful how they did wonderful work. But it was a different environment.
There's a whole different approach to it, wasn't it? Yeah.
And that's why in my chapter about the Sabbath, I quote Tiffany Shlain, who is a filmmaker, very prominent filmmaker, independent. And her book is called 24/6. And she talks about how she is a much more effective and creative filmmaker or doing anything in life when she takes off that one day to just disconnect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I keep thinking about taking out 3 days to disconnect, but that's really hard to do. That's and maybe if we were in Europe, we'd be predisposed to do that.
Well, my Ayurvedic doctor wants me to do that periodically. So beyond the one day a week, he wants me to periodically do that. And you can, like if you go camping, let's say, just, take a camping weekend and, disconnect for 3 days, for a long weekend, like July 4th weekend, or Labor Day weekend, and make it work.
Right. Why is modern medicine not the answer?
Go on forever about that. And I have read a lot of Deepak Chopra's books. The books that I like best about Deepak are the ones that talk about his balancing of Western medicine, which is, of course, what he is trained in, and his father and his brother are Western medicine medical professionals. But he also goes back to, his roots in India and I'm not an Ayurvedic doctor, but I am trained in Ayurveda. So I studied Ayurveda in India, and I also learned more about Ayurveda in the United States. But again, I am not a licensed Ayurvedic practitioner. But Ayurveda, the same as traditional Chinese medicine, it's all about finding the root cause of your problem and treating the root cause, which I feel that Western allopathic medicine is too often a Band-Aid approach. And this might not be a good example, but I recently had oral surgery, a couple different oral surgery procedures. And both times they automatically said, okay, here's your prescription to get painkillers. I'm like, why do I need painkillers? If I have any discomfort, I would prefer to know where the discomfort is, and if anything, do something to prevent it. I had oral surgery in South America, and the top oral surgeon there, he told me, eat papaya and nothing else for the first 24 hours. Well, of course, papain, the enzyme, is an excellent anti-inflammatory, and it does, a lot of things. So he never gave me painkillers. He's just like, eat papaya for the first 24 hours. So we unfortunately too often treat with meds. And of course, there's the term treat and street, meaning get the person in and out, because our healthcare system, it's not a healthy system. And too often there are good medical practitioners and caring medical practitioners, but they are not allowed the time to spend with their patients. As an example, when I, as a yoga therapist, my intake with new clients is 90 minutes to 2 hours long. Every time I visit with my Ayurvedic doctor, it's about an hour long as well. And of course, we all know that a traditional visit with your allopathic practitioner is only 5 to 10 minutes long, because that's just the way the systems are. And again, our allopathic system just looks at the body. They don't look at the lifestyle. I shouldn't say that. Not enough attention is paid to lifestyle and nutrition. And we have to admit that few doctors learn much about nutrition in med school.
There aren't enough doctors, and they don't have the time, I don't think, and they're taught differently. Yeah.
And even my Ayurvedic doctor and teacher, who I feature in my book in India, he even said that for many people, meaning the patients, he said, you will find that many patients just want a quick fix. And as an example, I consider myself a diabetic. My mother passed away from diabetes, and she was a very educated diabetic. I've been careful of my diet and sugar intake my entire life because of that. And I was diagnosed pre-diabetic about 14 years ago. I originally was given metformin. I stopped taking that after a couple of years. I don't do anything in terms of meds. Everything I manage through my lifestyle, and my blood sugar levels are excellent, but very few people would do what I do
Yeah,
we
I know somebody in particular that I say, let me give you this list of things that you can eat, that people eat when they're, and he says, no, he says, I can eat whatever I want and the medicine takes care of me, and that's,
exactly. And that's why we have to understand that, unfortunately, many people in our society, they're not willing to do that. And they want to just, okay, I'll take my insulin shots a couple times a day, and I'll drink my beer and
eat my cake and potatoes and all of that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here with me today. I think that we've all learned a lot. You have your book, which is called From the Boxing Ring to the Ashram. And we can get it at Barnes and Noble or Amazon or any place that books are sold, right?
any place pretty much in the world, in terms of online
Just
books.
Google it.
And in terms of in the stores in Texas, it's more common to find them in Texas, but you can always, of course, request that your stores have them if you want it in your stores or even in your libraries. That's another thing too. They're in a lot of libraries. And if it's not in your public library, you can request that it be at your public library.
And we have the link to your website, deborahcharnes.com/book or just deborahcharnes.com. And we'll put that underneath your podcast. Great. Thank you for talking to me today and all of your brilliant answers.
Thank you so much. Is there one thing I can add?
Yes, go ahead.
What I would like to add is that I find many times people come to my yoga classes because they say that their doctor told them, oh, do yoga. But their doctors don't tell them what kind of yoga they should do. And oftentimes what they end up doing can be harmful. And I am a yoga therapist. And if they're in my class and if they tell me why they're there, then of course I can work with them and I can have them do things that are appropriate for them. And I can have them not do things that are not appropriate for them. But I don't always know. And as an example, I used to work with cancer survivors. Every single cancer survivor had to have their doctor's approval to attend. It was fitness and mind body work. And all the doctors just gave them a green light for all activities. And yet I would say probably 80% of them had contraindications, which I was able to work with, but a typical yoga instructor would have no idea what to do with them. The same thing, I'm also trained in prenatal and postpartum and yoga for fertility. And there are so many things that women should and shouldn't do that can be very harmful during those days. And if they just go to yoga, they can be doing something that is very detrimental to their body and to their baby, which is why it is essential that whatever your physical concerns are, that you go to a specialist, such as a prenatal yoga instructor, certified prenatal yoga instructor, or a yoga therapist, because there's a big difference.
Yeah, you know what? In all of our programs, we say see your doctor first, but maybe with an instance like that, they should see their doctor first, get a note from their doctor that says specifically what they're looking for, and then communicate well with their yoga therapist, right?
Yeah.
That's good advice for probably anything that you take from your doctor to another practitioner.
And again, there are so many things that can be contraindicated. So a perfect example is with back pain. Some conditions you should never do back bends. Other conditions you should never do forward folds. And so if a doctor just says, oh, do yoga, and if the yoga teacher doesn't know anything about what their condition is, then that's not healthy. And then unfortunately, most of the yoga that is the most popular nowadays is not necessarily the healthiest for people with health issues.
Right.
When we talk about yoga as a healing art, we are talking about hatha. We are not talking about the other forms that are more commercialized.
I'm glad you added that. That's good to know. Anything else? Any last thoughts? Okay. Thank you so much for being here today. I enjoyed our visit. Thanks for listening to the show. If you liked what you heard, please give us a 5-star rating or review on iTunes.